Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Full Time Devils. My name is Stephen Howson. Today, joining me is our Lord and Saviour, Joseph. We have also got Karthik, and we've also got James as well joining us. Today, we're going to cover what's going on with Pogba and Souness, obviously, which I think is hilarious, but we are going to talk about it. We're going to look at maybe who is likely to get shifted from United, a couple of potential transfer targets, and maybe who the break has actually been good for. Not just injured players, but maybe there was people that needed a bit of a mental break. But let's start on Graeme Souness and Paul Pogba. If you've not known what's happened this week, United released a podcast, and I'll say released a podcast because they clearly recorded it prior to the lockdown. So I reckon they've been sitting on this for about a month, I would say. And some of the quotes have been coming out over the last week, and then obviously they dropped it this week. And Sky Sports wet themselves and couldn't wait to get Graeme Souness on to talk a load of shit. So they framed it up as being disrespectful. The person who called it disrespectful was Jamie Carragher, and he knows what being disrespectful is all about, so he was a good person to bring that up. And then they said to him, get your medals on the table. Now, I find that an interesting angle when measuring by medals is used, because that's the one thing that we're told we're not allowed to do when it comes to Steven Gerrard, unless he's just now ended the whole debate and dobbed his mate in it big time, because clearly Anderson is obviously a better footballer than him based on medals alone. But James, let's come to you first. What did you make of the whole Pogba thing? How much out of proportion did Sky blow it? And do you actually even think Pogba said anything disrespectful?
I mean, Sky, to be fair, they've got a rolling news channel 24 hours a day of just sport. And when there's no sport on, they've got to fill it with bollocks. So, I mean, it makes a change from just the constant shit that they're showing at the minute of just like, I think it was the other day, it was like just Neville and Carragher sat in a hotel somewhere in Manchester in like a basement floor just talking about a game they played in about 20 years ago. So I think it's not really, I think we kind of expected it really, because the Sky and anyone are just desperate for anything. And so you've got an instance where you've got Jamie Carragher, who's someone that spat at a child in a car, talking about how to be respectful towards Pogba. I think it's probably the best response he could have given. I mean, to say that he's never heard of Graeme Souness is possibly the best thing he could have said, because that's the type of thing that would really, piss off Souness, because it's the kind of thing if, I don't know, say for example, if when Beckham was playing in PSG, if like a really shit Michel Platini said to him, you're shit or whatever, then he probably wouldn't have heard of him. So I genuinely don't think Pogba knows who he is. And Souness is the same person that also almost started a civil war in Turkey by putting a Galatasaray flag in the middle of a pitch. So I don't really know. He doesn't have any foot to stand on. It just screams like Sky desperate for any sort of content to push out at the minute.
The way Sky got him on was the most YouTube thing I've ever seen Sky do. It was basically, they might as well have had this thumbnail like this and had Graeme Souness reacts to Pogba dig. Joe, what's your take on it? Since you've seen it?
I think, to be fair, I agree that it's obviously Sky have got loads of minutes to fill. They've got 24 hours a day, whatever, to fill. But I honestly just think that is what Graeme Souness's reaction was. I don't think he was like hamming it up. I think he is sort of a bit of an out of touch sort of old head who thinks that you're allowed to criticise players as much as you want, but if they say anything back, then they're being dickheads. You've got to respect your elders, all that stuff. I think he's just a little bit, that's just what he's like, isn't it? We've seen him criticise Pogba pretty much, exclusively. The only thing he said about Paul Pogba is bad things for 3 years now. So I don't think that was ever going to change, and now he's actually got something to talk about, because for the longest time, Pogba never said anything. I think he was asked about him. You asked before whether you think he was even disrespectful. He said, I don't really know who he is. I've heard he was a great player. It's not that disrespectful, is it?
No, and it's probably 100% accurate.
Yeah, what's he meant to do? Say, oh yeah, I've watched hundreds of hours on him because I knew he hated me. So I thought, in case anyone ever asked me about him, I'll watch his whole career back. Like, if you don't know him, you don't know him. He's not going to see him, is he? I watched a lot of old Fenerbahce games. Like, when's he going to look? Maybe he may have seen some old Liverpool highlights that he was part of. But like, when would he have seen him? It's not, there's no crossover there.
No, and I think that when you play for a club, someone said it's the same as him saying he doesn't know George Best, and I said it's absolutely not. Yeah, because he plays for a club George Best is a legend at. I think if you play for a club, there's an expectation that you know some of the history of that club. Not all of it. You don't have to be an encyclopedia of it. It certainly doesn't make you a better player if you are. But there is an expectation that you do know the history of the club. And I banged a tweet out yesterday where I said, Graeme Souness to Paul Pogba is as relevant as Gordon Cowans. Why is no one asking him about the 1982 European Cup winning Aston Villa team? It's totally irrelevant to Paul Pogba, born in the 90s, grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, who's got some countrymen who could be his idols in the likes of Zidane and people like that. People that he would have grown up and called legends. Not only that, the late 70s and early 80s are football's dark age in terms of broadcasting. There isn't those golden era highlights of matches. There isn't that sort of wall-to-wall coverage that there is now. I mean, original Ronaldo's in the news a little bit this week, and there's so little footage of him. And this is a guy that, played in the noughties, let alone Graeme Souness, who was just a fucking hatchet man in the 70s.
Wasn't there like a ban on football in like the 70s and 80s for like a solid 2 months at the start of one of the seasons?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
there was a TV blackout, if that's what you mean.
I think so. There was like a dispute between like the broadcasters and the Football League. So I think for like the first 2 months of one of the seasons, there was just no football on telly at all.
Yeah, that was 85, 86, and United won like 10 out of 12 games and absolutely was romping the league. And there's no footage of it whatsoever because there was no thingies. Karthik, what's your thoughts? Do you think that is there any way where Graeme Souness is right in any of this?
I don't think so, because, I mean, it's clear that he's obsessed with Pogba. We've seen it for ages now. He just has any excuse to talk about him. And sometimes it's unrelated. I think there was that one time, I can't remember who we were playing, but the guy on Sky Sports, the host, actually had to tell him, we can't talk about Pogba when he's not played the game.
Was this Everton a couple of months ago?
It might have been, yeah. And he literally had to tell him on air that you can't be talking about Pogba when he's unrelated. And he just had to go all quiet. And I'm just looking at him like, what are you doing? And that whole put your medals on the table thing. Isn't Pogba only like 3 medals behind him?
Yeah, and he's 27.
Yeah, so you've not even got a point there. He's probably going to beat you by the end of his career. So
yeah, that whole put your medals on the table thing is one step away from let's go outside and have a fight. Isn't it? It's literally like
it's like can you throw a kettle over a pub?
Yeah.
That episode in The Office where
exactly.
Brent does the quiz and he's stood in the car park and he like gets to throw the kettle over the pub to win it.
Graeme Souness has thrown a kettle over a pub. What have you ever done? Yeah, it doesn't. It's just.
If you want to talk about disrespect, I think it was the 3rd anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster, which we're recording this on Wednesday, which is the 31st anniversary. So RIP to all Liverpool fans that was killed in that tragedy. But Graeme Souness, who was a Liverpool captain, I believe, a Liverpool legend, a Liverpool manager, gave an exclusive to The Sun, which The Sun printed on the 3rd anniversary of Hillsborough. You don't need to have been a football fan for very long to understand the relationship, not just that Liverpool has with The Sun, but the whole footballing community has with Sun. If you want to talk about disrespect, that's where you have to start. Pogba was disrespectful by saying, I believe you as a great player, but I don't know much about you. Probably, like I said already, entirely factual, entirely truthful, and in no way disrespectful whatsoever. Selling a story to the fucking Sun in the position as a Liverpool ambassador, legend, and manager. I mean, it's not for me to be fucking getting angry on Liverpool fans' behalf, but I can't imagine that went down too fucking well.
Yeah, the disrespect side of it is just, he obviously had to come up with something to say. He was never going to say, he's never going to come on Sky Sports and say, do you know what, fair enough, was it? Because he obviously hates Paul Pogba and has done for years. And, I suppose you have to kind of think, what do we expect, really? What do we expect him to... There was no chance that they weren't going to make him respond to it. And there was no chance he was going to say something, oh, actually, you know what, fair enough, I like him now. Now he doesn't know who I am. So I think you have to expect it, but it doesn't make him right. It doesn't make him... I think, again, we're sort of arguing over an argument that's been kind of decided already. Most people understand that Souness has got this weird, strange obsession, this sort of bias against Paul Pogba, and even non-United fans can sort of see that, like you mentioned.
Well, it's
before.
a meme, isn't it? It's that whole meme is
it's almost like a character, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like it does feel fictional almost. This sort of obsession with him. So I think it's as silly as it all is, and it's just predictable, really, isn't it?
Do you think this whole Souness Pogba saga? And certainly this last week has helped any Reds get behind him in any way?
I do. Yeah, personally, I think we might well have. But, I just think everyone likes a common enemy, don't they? Like, do you know when you're at work And I mean, not in my work. Forget that I'm about to say this, Stephen. But you know, it's sort of nice when everyone can rally around like hating the boss, or there's the one dickhead in the office who everyone's like, we don't like this dickhead, and then all of a sudden he leaves, and everyone starts falling out because you're like, actually, the thing we all had in common was hating this one guy. So maybe there will be a bit of we can all rally around like. If we none of us like Souness, and he thinks this about Pogba, so we have to disagree with it and like him. So maybe it'll get a few fans on side.
I think it'll be like a momentary thing. Won't it? Sorry, James. Go on.
No, I was just saying. I mean, I think it's just quite funny in a way. I think that the whole Souness thing now is almost like, you know, when you make a point and you go so far into it that you can't go back and actually revert to what you've said now. That Souness just has to keep on going with this like obsession that he's got with Pogba.
I never did that with Ashley Young.
No, never, ever, or any other United player, or any. But it's a bit like that in a way where it's almost like Sky and Souness both know that if he'll say something controversial about Pogba, he'll get people to talk about it, and therefore they'll get more publicity. So I think people that win out of this is probably Sky because they're getting publicity, even though everyone's taking the piss out of them, they're still getting people talking to them about it. But I think maybe I don't want to say it's going to save Pogba's career at United, but I think it's definitely some good PR surrounding him that it will be beneficial to United fans that he hasn't had for a few months. I mean, the talk of Raiola, the talk of other things that he's done as well, of, you know, not signing a new contract and talking that he wants to leave. It's actually quite refreshing to actually hear and people talk about Pogba in a positive light for a change.
But isn't the whole issue with Pogba is that this circus exists? And now, on one hand, you could kind of say he's not got anything to do with Graeme Souness's fucking obsession with him. And it was right. I think it was Sam that asked him the question. Obviously, off this channel, formally. I think it was fair that he was asked that question because it's clear Souness has got some sort of love affair going on with him. And it was fair that he answered that question. And it's nothing like when his brother starts talking or when his agent starts talking. I think it's totally different scenario to how this conversation comes up and how this is reacted to. I don't think it's a problem having this conversation. But isn't it not a problem to have just this constant circus surrounding him all the time?
Maybe, yeah, but I think my point was more alluding to the fact that I'm not disagreeing with you there. I think, you know, Raiola himself is a cancer on football, and I think I think when Raiola goes, when the sort of super agents disappear, I don't think that will happen. But if it did, I think we'd probably see more of Pogba as a player, and I think he'd show up a bit more. But I just think. I think it's good that we're having this discussion about Pogba and Souness because he's well within his right to criticise him. But I kind of agree with you in a way. I mean, if you look at Raiola, if you look at everything he said, I think if Pogba didn't have Raiola as his agent, I think if De Ligt wasn't Raiola's agent, you'd probably see better performances on the pitch because it's just this constant circus about is he leaving, is he staying? And I think Raiola, the only thing, he doesn't care about the football itself. He just wants to make as much money as possible. And we're seeing that now with Newcastle. I mean, I kind of wanted to talk about this in a way because Newcastle look like they're going to get Saudi owners. But I think as United fans, if we were going to get Saudi owners, I still would prefer the Glazers, even though they're shit people because, you know, they're not committing a war in Yemen for the sake of sports watching. So it's a difficult one, isn't it?
The whole Saudi thing is a total division, I think. And half of me thinks, fuck it, there's nothing I can do either way. I might as well enjoy the 19 European Cups we're about to win. The other half of me wouldn't want owners with that sort of human rights record. And there's another side of me that's finding it very interesting, looking at Newcastle and the coverage. I think Henry Winter, someone that I do respect, was talking about how Newcastle are going to get their soul back. And I was like,
when does it stop though? So would you have Kim Jong-un in charge of United if we won like 30 European Cups on the bounce? Where's the line?
I've always had a great affection for our dear leader. On the bounce.
Right, yeah. So
mate, I'll get that haircut and everything. Not a fucking issue.
I want to get you one of those nice grey suits.
I'd look great in that suit.
Yeah, you look fantastic in one of those.
I'm sure there'll be a Photoshop.
It's been designed for the fuller figure, that. I'm sure it has.
Yeah, it definitely has. You can fit a bathtub in one of them.
Yeah. I love how the country's in famine. My guy's definitely eating at a 3-man level.
Got some BMI to him.
Yeah, he has anyway. Right. Let's move on a little bit from Souness and Pogba. Although not really, because I'm going to go deep on it, I think, myself. We've seen a lot of players doing the right thing during the lockdown. Didn't like the way the government decided to try and pick out Premier League footballers. And I think there's various reasons for that. I think it's because footballers are generally referred to in how much they've cost or how much they earn, instead of the fact that they're just a person. And I don't think it was fair that they were singled out ahead of like CEOs who've been furloughing their staff left, right, and centre. Why they need to be giving up wages before anybody else gives up wages, and obviously the tax that they pay is kind of funding everything that's happening in the first place. Do you think that any attitudes to players will have changed because of what we've seen in the lockdown? I think the last 6 months, I think somebody like Marcus Rashford in the last 6 months, he's learned sign language to communicate with some deaf fans. He's on social media replying to fans constantly. I mean, like, players have been criticised for their use of social media. I think Marcus has got it absolutely perfect at the moment. The balance is right there. He's not revealing too much of himself. He's not causing any sort of negative spin. He's just purely giving back to the fans. We've seen him get involved with the fair share thing and raise over 20 million for school kids that might be struggling to get regular meals because they get them at school. And obviously we was part of his campaign at Christmas for the In the Box, where he delivered stuff himself to the homeless of Manchester. Do you think that there's other players going to come out of this, or do you think that people's perception of some footballers is going to come out different from the other side of this?
I do, yeah. I think that we've seen certain clubs as well, and not to always pat United on the back and slag everyone else off, but the way that United have dealt with things from day one, as far as I'm concerned, has been as good as anyone, probably better than most.
Well, I don't know about that, Joe, because on my notes here it says that's exactly what we're supposed to do.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, I think you look at Liverpool, you look at, obviously, have done the right thing now, but certainly
Socialist
lost
Liverpool, may I add.
some favour. Yeah, certainly lost some favour for the way they handle things. Newcastle, Tottenham, other ones. I think United have been pretty much the sort of the leader in how to deal with this sort of ethically and in terms of that kind of thing. But I think that the whole footballers are always the first people who get told that they earn too much. There are hundreds and thousands of people in the country that earn more than footballers, but they are, because there's such a public-facing company. There is no, it relies on fans. Bankers don't have fans. You don't know the name of the CEOs for these sorts of people. It's a
class thing as well, though, isn't it? Because if you look at the sort of Tory people, they don't want to see working class boys particularly become rich footballers. They don't like to see it, and I think that's why we've seen as well there's such anger aimed at footballers, which is kind of peculiar in a way, because you just don't see it with any other industry. I mean, if you look at hedge funders, for example, for the Tory party, or even Matt Hancock or Boris Johnson, they haven't donated any money. So why is it different for footballers? Why are they getting the blame when there are other people in society that have not donated any more money and therefore couldn't? I think there's a big socio-economic sort of impact of that.
Oh, Buckingham Palace. Let's open this fucker up and get people in the garden.
Well, I think with Neville actually has seen a good person there who's opened hotel football and has done the right thing for NHS staff. And I think we're going to see that. And I think it's actually quite disgusting now. You've seen, especially the Sun, we were talking about them earlier now, putting nice headlines out about the NHS when 2 years ago they were saying they wanted to sack the doctors for asking for a pay rise. And I think we're going to see the true colours of the Tory party in 2 years' time, when Boris Johnson is sitting there thanking the NHS staff from certain countries when, he's the same person that... under this new point system, they wouldn't have been able to come in because of the pay that they would have got. They also, he's the same person that was campaigning for Brexit, which has also decreased immigration numbers and has also referred to people with a number of racial slurs, which I'm not going to go into. But he's essentially just a massive twat, and I think he's hiding behind it quite well at the minute.
I think it's just an easy target, isn't it? Because it shows how big football is in this country, especially, and the sort of status that footballers have. They have more attention on them, and you know more about them. So then they become an easier target. And so you look at people like, I don't know, like Marcus Rashford, for example. When he gets a new contract, you know how much he's on, and then you can go, oh, why does he get this much when NHS staff are this much, and why isn't he donating? But then when he does the good stuff like he is right now, you need to give him that attention, and I think he's getting it, but he's not getting as much as he should. Whether that then impacts him going into next season and whether fans will look at him differently, I don't think it will, because you look at Raheem Sterling when he's voiced his opinion in terms of anti-racism and stuff. If he has a bad game, you look on Twitter and you'll see people calling him PR Raheem Sterling or P Raheem Sterling, whatever you want to call it. So it can always go back on you. So I don't think football fans will change their perspective on him, but I think people who are away from football we'll start to look at them a bit more differently if more players came out and did stuff like this.
Yeah, and the class side of things, I think there's definitely a class element to who they pick on and who they don't. But I do just think most of it is as simple as what you said, Karthik. Of it's just football is such a big thing. Everyone knows football, and unlike any other job in the world, there is this obsession, like you mentioned, Stephen, with this person is this money, this person earns this much. The buying and selling of. I know it's you're buying them as workers, but it's almost this sort of human sales. This person is 40. Look at this person. They are £100 million. It's like the buying and selling of assets, which is humans. Everything has such a basis in money, and that's the only focus for so many things. I think they just become just this.
Well, it's populism, isn't it? That's what they're trying to do. But I think the impact of football as well. I mean, people talk about, all right, footballers are on quite a handsome salary, but I mean, what about the swag sellers? What about the turnstile person that you see every other week at Old Trafford? What about the fanzine sellers? What about all these other people that work at cafes outside the ground that are going to be affected by football? And that's not what the attention is being aimed at. There's actually a lot of people that work in football that aren't well off at all. It's just the top 1-2% or whatever that earn these big salaries. And I think people forget that football, like any other industry, is going to have to furlough staff, like we saw at lower level. I mean, clubs like FC United, clubs like Altrincham, Droylsden, they're going to suffer because of this, and some might even go out of business, and that's just not being paid any attention to.
The top 5% of the country has got assets or salary in excess of 1.7 million. So that's the top 5%. That's 3.5 million people. Mm-hmm. There's not 3.5 million footballers. How many professional footballers is there in the Premier League?
20 times 25-ish. So
500.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's 3,499,500 people that are also earning what would be classed as a footballer's wage in this country. But I haven't seen any of them people called out.
Yeah, and there are plenty of people, bankers and, like I said, hedge fund managers and stuff, who take more than even Paul Pogba's salary in bonuses every year, let alone salary. And these are the sorts of people who the rules have been purposely turned a blind eye to in terms of taxes and avoidance of
Lewis Hamilton, doesn't he purposely base himself in Monaco for the tax reasons, so he doesn't pay tax? Yeah, exactly. So how about people who aren't actually paying tax?
There's plenty of people. And even Gary Barlow obviously needs to pay tax. That's a shit thing, not paying tax, but he's on the lower end of the earning spectrum here. There are plenty of multi-million, multi-billion-pound industries that pay.
Look at Amazon, Google. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I think it's something crazy like the top, it's like 95% of the world's wealth is owned by like the top 0.3% or something mad like that.
Yeah,
it's absolutely wild. Right then, players that we should have a clear out. Is there any surprises in this list, do we think? Anyone that you would like to see cleared? All right, I'm going to assume Lingard, Pereira, Sanchez, Smalling, Jones, Rojo. Everyone thinks that they should probably go.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else, rather than go over them and the reasons why again, is there anybody else that you're like, do you know what? I wouldn't mind if he fucked off.
De Gea.
Bold?
Well, I think, to be honest, he's probably, if we're going to compete at the top level in the first sort of second positions, we need a goalkeeper that can distribute the ball properly. And we've seen with De Gea in the past couple of seasons, his distribution just isn't there. I mean, if you look at any other top side in Europe, whether that's City, with Ederson,
in Europe.
Yeah, or whether that's Liverpool with Alisson, they can all play the ball properly. But De Gea, I mean, I don't know what his statistics are, but it seems on most occasions when he has the ball, he can't seem to find a pass. And I think now's the right time to sell him on. I mean, we've got the likes of Henderson coming through. He's played really well at Sheffield United this season. We've also got Romero as well. He can distribute the ball pretty well. And I think we can probably get some good money for De Gea and then invest it in maybe a good striker or another midfielder.
Do you think we could get good money for De Gea, though, if he's on 400 grand a week? Who's picking that bill up?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, how much do you reckon we can get from 60, 70 million?
Who's even looking for a top goalkeeper?
That's it. And who's putting De Gea on that list at the moment? Because you'd have to assume if you come up to United now and said, I'll give you 30 million for Henderson, they'd probably take it. Are they taking that for De Gea? No. But then you have his wages on the top. You're talking, someone needs to be talking £100 million when you include wages for De Gea. And I don't know how many people are going to do that. And I don't think that you're going to have anyone coming in to test United's resolve in that sense. So even though I agree that I could see a benefit in moving him on, 1 for wage bill, 2 for giving other people an opportunity, and 3 for the distribution problem, I just don't think it's feasible. I think it's almost as impossible as like, why don't the Glazers just fuck off?
Well, I guess, but I mean, yeah, I kind of agree with you in that sense, but it's the same problem with Pogba and the players that Real Madrid have. I mean, Real Madrid wanted to buy Pogba now for 2 years, but because they've got 5 or 6 players, they've got Isco, they've got James Rodriguez, they've got Lucas Vazquez, they've got about 3 of the players that they need to sell before they can afford to buy Pogba. Bale's another one that are on such high wages that not enough clubs can buy them. So we have a position like we do with Sanchez, who's on shitloads of money, but no one else apart from Inter or maybe a few other clubs can afford him. They don't want him, so he's stuck.
Yeah, Sanchez is going to be a really interesting one to see what happens with him, because I can just see him coming back to United and us being stuck with him.
Yeah, the distribution thing of De Gea, I think, I do think it's one of his weakest points. But I think if you look at the teams over the last few years that have done well in Europe, you look at Juventus, who've got to a few European Cup finals. They had Szczesny and about a 35-year-old Buffon in there for a couple of those finals. Liverpool got to the final with Mignolet and Karius as their goalkeeper. Obviously, in the end, that did lose them. But all goalkeepers who haven't got particularly great distribution or who aren't, these top goalkeepers. I do worry with Henderson that we might lose him. But then there's also this thing of the grass always looks greener, doesn't it? He's played excellent for Sheffield United in a side that, doesn't concede as many shots, doesn't concede as many goals. And when he does make mistakes, you don't get that criticism that you get with United. Everyone knows it goes up 1, 2, 3 levels. And I think if he has a shaky start and we've just sold De Gea, then all of a sudden you're thinking, hang on a sec, we might have a real problem here where we've got this guy in who we've sort of bet it all on this one guy and a proven goalkeeper in De Gea's left, and we might be struggling.
What do you think of Romero? He's played in the World Cup final before.
Best backup goalkeeper the world's ever seen.
I think he's a good goalkeeper, but I wouldn't have him as our first choice keeper. I think
if De Gea got injured, rather than a selling thing, because it's a different vibe, that isn't it? But if De Gea was injured for any length of time, they're like, right, Romero, you're in. I wouldn't be scared.
No, I wouldn't be scared to have him in for 10, 15 games in a row. But I think if you're saying this guy's our new guy, isn't he like 32 as well, 33 maybe, Romero? So he's not particularly. He's not particularly young. I don't think he would be the first choice option. I think he's a perfect second choice goalkeeper. I think he's excellent. He can play full tournaments in League Cups, full tournaments in Europa League, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't trust him to be the first choice. We saw that silly mistake he made against.
I would love to speak to him and be like, "What? Talk to me. What's going on?" Because there was all that thing about when he first joined, the Argentinian national team was like, "Mate, you need to go and play regular football, or you're not going to the World Cup." And he's like, "Yeah."
League run. He's got the easiest job in the world, hasn't he? He just sits on the bench and goes to training for United and gets paid for it.
I believe Lee Grant is essentially a goalkeeping coach at United.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
I think that's the word.
Is it easier to be sat on the bench than playing? I'd rather be playing. Isn't it an easier job for like Romero or someone like that? I suppose there's less pressure. Is that what you mean?
Third choice goalkeeper might be the best one.
Nah, I don't think so, because he never gets to play. That's not fun.
You're like a competition winner then, though, aren't you? You're never really going to play any proper matches. You just play like...
What's the positive part about not playing?
Well, if you're Lee Grant and you're 40 and you were never going to play for a top team, and then United sign you and you're like, guess what? You want to be our third choice goalkeeper? And he's like, fucking yeah, baby.
Like I watched it. I watched an interview about him, and he was saying how he loved the fact that he was at United. He looked happy to be there, but he was saying, of course, it does affect him mentally that he never gets to play. So clearly, it's not as
well, it's either this or the school run, mate. You choose.
Yeah.
I think the whole goalkeeper situation is an absolute mental one, isn't it? I mean, it's in terms of like, it's not just what we've got there. I mean, Kovar's come in and been fantastic for United this season. You've still got Joel Pereira on the books, who has looked fantastic at times. Obviously, you've got Dean Henderson, you've got Romero, you've got Lee Grant, who, Joe, let's be honest, one of the best performances I've seen at Old Trafford last 5 years was Lee Grant. So,
and I don't know if a lot of you know this, but Raymond van der Gouw is still on the books. He's on loan at Oldham. So he could come back in at any time. He's 56 years old, but he's technically still there.
But he's only played like 10 games in the last 25 years, so he's pretty fresh still.
Fresh.
Being a third choice goalkeeper's got to be awesome. Was it Nicky Culkin in '99? I think.
Yeah, played the last 3 minutes against Arsenal, wasn't it? He's got like the record for like the latest substitute in a game to come on and play like 30 seconds. Like kick the ball and that was it. That was a whistle.
But his name's on the list for being a treble winner at Manchester United. Not many people can say that.
Right. David May, he played a bit of that season, but he's bang in the middle of all the treble photos in Barcelona. I think that's just like the best attitude to have if you're a footballer. Like just get in the middle of all the photos, even if you're not even like a.
I probably used to take the piss out of a player that was part of the squad, but maybe played like 1 or 2 games. And then we had Michael Clegg in our studio for a little bit. He was using our studio to create his own podcast and stuff like that. And then you have a conversation with him, and I don't think he got a medal. He has got a league winners medal, but I don't think he's got a league winners medal from every time that he was there, even though that he played a part in some cups. And he made a really good point, which was like, I turned up to work every single day with that squad. I trained every single day with that squad. You know, I might have been on a bench or I might have come off, which enabled someone else to have a break, to be able to miss this game and play that game. And he says, no matter how small a part I played, I marked gigs in training. I did this and that, and I did this and that. And he's right. Anybody from the kit man to the physio to the goalkeeping coach that is part of that squad owns whatever you win in that season. Everybody has a small part to play that builds towards whatever you did.
I'd like to see what Shane says about that.
Well, but do you know how fun it is to go and have a kickabout on the part we made?
Yeah.
Imagine doing that for 10 grand a week.
Yes.
Amazing, isn't it?
Well,
and
imagine
even that you support.
Yeah.
Imagine even doing that at like Northern Premier League level, even if you don't get paid for it. Like imagine actually playing for a football team.
Exactly. It's a great career. Perfect.
Imagine playing football. Forgot what that feels like.
Oh, can't wait to kick a ball. I'm going to
leaving
kick
the
it.
House.
I can't wait to boot it in the air as high as I can and then try and control it and then getting it wrong and then going upset and going back home. But I'm so excited to do that. Just touch. Got it.
Kicking it over the fence into a local school and having to climb round the wall to get into it to avoid the CCTV and then climb back out again.
Oh,
Told you
remember
about
going
being at
out?
the school.
Going out was awesome, wasn't it?
Oh,
It's all right, yeah.
I love it.
Right. Honestly, if it doesn't get like biblically out of hand, like, do you know in like Hangover 2, like that level of carnage, like it should almost be like a purge where it's just like, just look, you've got till 4 o'clock, have at it sort of thing. Like the day that we're allowed out. I think nights out like that and concerts and probably football in front of crowds, certainly at Premier League level and probably Championship level, is a long way off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm scared that we all want this, like, right, pubs are open, smash it. There's no way, it can't work like that, can it? It's going to have to be like, they're coming back open, but it's curfews, this to shut this time. We've got to have maximum limits on who can come in and who can't, because there's such a, despite being the best thing in the world, football, music, and pubs are all pretty much unnecessary in terms of risking people's lives.
Yeah, and they're also very, very high risk in terms of transmitting a virus.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if McTominay's goal against City was the last in United's history?
Oh.
Be a good way to go out, to be fair.
It wasn't, though. We did this, didn't we? The last goal was Andres Pereira against
Pereira. Yeah.
The last in front of a crowd.
Everyone forget. Yeah, the last one in front of a crowd was McTominay. But yeah, the last goal in history.
It wasn't even a good goal.
Honestly, I can't remember it.
I
was a bit pissed.
Pereira's one of those players, right, in pre-season that plays amazing, like McAdra and like Juve, and then when it comes to the actual season, he's just like, no, can't be arsed.
Do you know why? It's because they're trying full 100% in pre-season, and all good players are just tossing it off a little bit.
That's what I used to be like in training when I used to play football, like every week at like under 12s. I'd try so hard in training. I was the best player in training, then get on the pitch like that and just be like absolutely bang average. Loved it.
How many goals do you reckon you could score against Urara Red Diamonds of Japan?
At least 5.
Yeah.
Easy. Just chip the ball up.
Hang on. Who's crossing it?
Wan-Bissaka.
None.
David Beckham.
4.
Yeah. Just hands on 2 heads, jump, Nod it in.
You've got a bit of a Georgie Samaras vibe about you, I reckon.
Yeah.
You could be like a big target man.
Andy Carroll.
Oh, who did I call you?
Oh,
One
I
of the
don't know.
paddock sessions.
Probably something really nice. I'd have thought a nice compliment. Good
Socrates
footballer.
it was because he
Oh, yeah, actually,
wears a
that
headband.
That is a compliment.
Not the Greek philosopher fella,
Yeah,
the Brazilian footballer. What's all this about anyway? With the disrespect that original Ronaldo's getting, where's this come from?
Who's disrespecting him?
I don't know. Maybe I've imagined it because I love him.
I saw people disrespecting Giggs yesterday. That was horrible.
I saw that this morning.
Saying he's got one good highlight throughout his career, even though he's won like 23 medals and what? It's fucking ridiculous.
Get your medals on the table, lad.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh.
Who is it? It's only like Maxwell who's got more than him in it.
There's a keeper from Ukraine, I think, has got one more.
Yeah, but they don't count. They were robbed in a Soviet train somewhere in 1980.
Right. We went through this, I think, the other day when we was talking about just the sheer number of medals that Paul Scholes had won. You can pick pretty much anyone and give them 5 careers and they don't win as much as Scholes did. And he's extremely disrespected. But 13 titles, 13 leagues, which means, if you're thick, 13 seasons. 13 seasons you were in the best team.
That's mad, isn't it? That's honestly, everyone else in the league, pathetic. To everyone who let that happen, obviously we look at it from the good side of it. If you support any team other than Man United, you have been pathetic since 1993. How could you
last
possibly
5 years
let
not
that
so
happen?
much.
Don't think about that. Giggs' career. How dare you let that happen? Unbelievable.
They
Isn't
call
it?
him a longevity merchant. I don't get it.
What the fuck does that mean?
Exactly.
He's still playing at 40 years age.
Why is that a
40
bad
years
thing?
of age.
Yeah.
That's mad. 40.
If someone called me a longevity merchant, that'd be the best compliment I've ever had.
Go and watch his
Thank you very
last game
much.
against Hull that he played in, James Wilson's debut. Go and watch that game and tell me that at 40 years of age, Ryan Giggs was, like nostalgia reasons he was playing. He was still one of the best players on the pitch. And the fact that he changed his game and going from, if I had to compare him to someone now, like a Zaha-style winger, just very agile, constantly checking back and beating his man, to the cultured sort of central midfielder, continental midfielder that he became, it's insane. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody do that sort of transition ever.
And people forget as well because he played for so long. You're thinking of Giggs in like 2013, 14 or whatever. He was 30 in 2004. Like this is a man.
Forget that.
Yeah, he was in his 30s for so long.
He had a testimonial in about 2001.
Exactly. This is 1994
on another 13 years.
2001 too. That was his peak. That was his peak of his career there, and he was still brilliant after that. He was 30.
96 Ryan Giggs to 98 Ryan Giggs, and probably a little bit in 99 as well. Let's be real, was my favourite Ryan Giggs when he was the tricky winger, beat a man and leave him for dust. Ryan Giggs. That was my favourite version of Giggs.
People don't remember that, do they?
What he became. I mean, there was a time we played Chelsea, and I remember being shitting myself because we had Fletcher when Fletcher wasn't respected, and Ryan Giggs as centre mid, and I was like, oh, and they had like Essien, fucking Ballack, and you're like, we're gonna get battered, and we beat them, and you just think they're so disrespected, like Giggs and Scholes. It's almost like, they won like 24 fucking titles between them.
Yeah.
What?
It's almost like they won so many that people think that none of them count in a way. It's like, does that even... Like, I'd rather someone who really grafted for one than won 13, like, quite... Not easily, obviously, because it was a graft, but that's how it seems to...
I don't win the treble without Giggs and Scholes at all.
No, of course not.
No, and we don't... We won 3 on a row twice with them being integral 10 years apart.
I was watching Premier League years actually. You forget actually how good United were for like those few years from like the treble from '99 to like 2003. United were just it's crazy that we didn't win anything in Europe because everyone else was just so far like low down compared to how United were in the league. I mean, we
got stuffed by Real Madrid in 1 year.
Yeah,
Monaco did us 1 year. Leverkusen did us. It
Porto.
was very close. We're talking semis and quarterfinals. I think we went out in a group stage once, like 2006 or something.
Remember that second group stage? That was shit.
Yeah, that was 2000, wasn't it?
It was like, in the sort of early 2000s, UEFA experimented with 2 group stages, and it was.
That was.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
See, that was when they was in there full on, like trying to make a Super League thing happen.
We already kind of have a Super League. I mean, the Champions League is basically the Super League because you get the top clubs that always get into it from the top leagues. And if you look at before, I mean, if you look at the winners of the old European Cup, you had Star Bucharest, Red Star Belgrade that would win it. And now, I mean, it's basically the same few teams from all the same leagues in Europe that always win the Champions League because of how much more money they've got.
Yeah, that's the issue with trying to compare data and stats across multiple generations, especially from the beginning of the Premier League era to now, is that the league is much less competitive now than it was then. And people were like, oh, United always spent money. Liverpool, Tottenham, and I think Newcastle outspent us in the 90s. Yeah. Tottenham and Liverpool outspent us in the 80s. Chelsea...
Go on.
Chelsea and City outspent us in the noughties. Like United only started spending money properly, like obscenely, post Fergie, and that's just catching up really.
We still wasted money under Sexton and Ferguson, and even then that wasn't enough to catch up with other people. I mean, if you look at some of the big early signings of Ferguson and going back to Dave Sexton, I mean, United still wasted money on some pretty shit players. I mean, if you look at the fellow from Forest that we signed, the striker that was useless, ended up becoming a postman.
Gary Birtles.
Yeah, that's the one. And
he was good at Forest, though. He won a couple of European Cups at Forest, didn't he?
Forest,
at least one.
It's just out of my reach here, but I'm obsessed with it, with Clough and Forest of that era. Fascinating.
Insane.
Clough's philosophy, which is, it holds weight today. It was about recruitment.
Yeah.
And it wasn't extremely tactical. And I think football post-90s and post-Italian football in the 80s and 90s has become a very tactical game. But fundamentally, football is still about recruitment. And that's what Clough had. Brilliant. He would have, him and Peter Taylor would have a perfect eye for exactly what they needed. And they would be able to find that in second division players and kids. And they would find that, they'd put that into the team. And there's loads of anecdotes about it, but one of the best ones about Clough signing someone is he'd be in the middle of shaking your hand, welcoming you to Nottingham Forest, and then he would tell you, the second I find someone better, I'm getting rid of
you. Fair.
That's elite.
Fair. You said that to me when I started at Stretford Paddock, didn't you, Steve? Same thing, and it's worked.
But, and he was true to that word, and what he would do very well is he would identify a replacement, and he would sell you to Liverpool, Manchester United, Aston Villa, and he would sell you for a lot of money, and then he would go and buy your replacement for 30 grand. Like, and that was what he was excellent at. And then I think drink took a hold of him a little bit, and he definitely tapered off towards the end of his career. And obviously Nottingham Forest got relegated at the start of the Premier League. But I think he's a fascinating character, and some of his principles of managing a club, recruitment and stuff like that, they still hold water today. It's about recruitment. All right, why were Manchester United good in the 90s? Yes, there's a percentage of it allocated to Fergie's tactical genius, which I think that's another thing which I think goes under people's radar. The tactical flexibility and insights Sir Alex Ferguson had over such a long career was fantastic. But fundamentally, it was about recruitment, and whether that was bringing in the players through the academy, which obviously was a huge part of our success, or identifying the likes of Roy Keane, Eric Cantona, Jaap Stam, Rio Ferdinand, a young Ronaldo, Michael Carrick, Wayne Rooney, all of these sorts of players, whether it was that or it was identifying the players to come through the academy, it was about recruitment. Why were Manchester City good? Because they threw money at it. But what does money give you? It gives you recruitment. Why were Chelsea good? Because they had the recruitment. Why have Liverpool been good? Is it tactical? Well, yes, but it's also about recruitment, because until they got a goalkeeper that wasn't a fucking traffic cone and a centre-half that could tackle, they were miles off the pace. Only a couple of years ago, miles off the pace, a good centre-half and a good goalkeeper, just proving recruitment is the be-all and end-all. You can have tactics, you can have systems, but if you've only got a little dick, you ain't fucking doing much with it. So
it's about time though as well, isn't it? I mean, if you look at United under Ferguson in the mid-2000s and even in his first 4 years, I mean, United would give him money to spend, especially Ferguson, and some of it he did waste, but they just kept on giving him more because they knew he'd get it right. I mean, before we signed Cantona, for example, United signed Dion Dublin for quite a lot of money. I mean, millions of pounds, and he broke his leg. We'd signed strikers before that, and wasn't David Gill, it was Edwards. Didn't say to him what Woodward said to Mourinho when he asked for a new defender. He didn't say, "Well, you've already got Dublin for however much money. I'm not giving you another striker." We let him sign him, so he knew what he wanted. I mean, if you go back to the mid-2000s when United signed Alan Smith, United signed Jemba Cleverson, pretty shit players, but the board didn't turn around and say, "No, you're not having Wayne Rooney, you're not having Michael Carrick, you're not having Berbatov," despite spending 20 million on strikers, and they just let him buy him, and that's kind of.
Look at the summer of 2012 when we signed Robin Van Persie. Fergie goes, "I want a striker," and they didn't say, "Well, you've already got Wayne Rooney, Chicharito, Danny Welbeck, and Berbatov." 4 pretty good strikers in the grand scheme of things, plenty to rotate with. He went, "I want another striker." He went and got him another striker. We won the league. It's about recruitment.
And you look at some of those teams we mentioned before, about like the teams that United have lost to, or the teams that sort of come up in Europe and do really well sort of against the odds. Like the Monaco team's a great example from a few years ago. You look at that team, it wasn't this incredible tactics, incredible management. It was Bernardo Silva, Mbappe, Moutinho, all these Falcao, all these players that have Fabinho have since gone on to other teams, and exactly, and gone on to other teams afterwards, and been brilliant for those teams as well, because it's the teams with the best players that win the most games. That's just how it is.
Look at the Leicester team that won the title. They came out of nowhere only because people didn't understand who those players was. But now we know how good Mahrez was. We know how good Kante was. No coincidence he won another title with Chelsea. We know how good Jamie Vardy was. You might have just peaked at the right time with Huth and Wes Morgan, but you had a nucleus of some excellent players that just weren't fancied. And credit to Ranieri for identifying and getting a tune out of those players and that team. But that's ultimately what this is all about. It's recruitment. It annoyed me the way they got rid of Ranieri like that. Because they've shown that they're still able to go and do some pretty good recruitment in identifying the likes of Ndidi and Tielemans and James Maddison. I think with the right manager, Leicester, as they're kind of proving, can still be a bit of a force. But it's fundamentally down to the players. Like you was talking earlier when you were saying some of the signings that Fergie got wrong in the mid-2000s, that was his worst period. Now, was that his worst period because he'd lost it as a manager? Well, evidently not, because either side of that worst period, he won a Champions League and 3 titles on a bounce. He clearly hadn't lost it as a manager, which is something I see labelled at people all the time. He's lost it, he's past it, he's old news. Well, when he had a Wayne Rooney that matured, and he had a Ronaldo that matured, and Rio Ferdinand that had matured, and then he added the likes of Michael Carrick and Owen Hargreaves. Oh, Vidic shit. As well. Suddenly, and then Vidic and Evra. Suddenly now we're a formidable team. If it was all about coaching, the transfer market wouldn't exist.
Do you think it's fair to say that he saved United from bankruptcy? Because after the Glazer takeover, I mean, Ferguson's coaching alongside TV money. I think if United didn't get that, I mean, the debt could have just got to a point where, it wasn't sustainable. I mean, the leverage buyout that the Glazers used, I mean, it could have had a lot more severe consequences. And I think now, after the form is starting to pick up again, we're starting to really see the real reason behind all these protests. And I'll probably get shit for this, I don't care. But people protested in the summer against the Glazers on Twitter because United were doing shit. It had nothing to do with the Glazers. They just wanted to blame the form on someone, especially the Twitter protests. I mean, if they really gave a shit about the Glazers, where were they 5-10 years ago? They weren't there.
You might be right on that, and I've always been supportive of people that dislike our owners, but I do think you're right in that the protest went very quiet during our successful period. I remember the marches in 2005. I remember the protests in 2010, and my personal belief was that those didn't work, and it was very aggressive and quite violent at times.
They'd get a police mob out of the ground at one point. I mean, they were fencing the Glazers into the stadium. That's how bad it got.
It's criminal damage to their property as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was all sorts. In 2005, there was a lot of stuff. And for me, the fact that none of that made a blind bit of difference, I legitimately don't think they give a flying fuck.
Fucking police escort in and out of the ground.
They're not going to be bothered by a bit of singing. I'm sorry, I get it, and I'll happily support it, but they're not going to be bothered by a few people singing they want you out. It's just not going to happen.
And the problem is, you can protest as much as you want against the Glazers, but unless you've got 4 billion,
Exactly.
you don't get rid of them. And there's only literally a handful of people in the world that could muster that sort of cash up. So it's all right protesting against the Glazers. And like I said, I will support anything that looks to change that regime. But then you're looking at out of the frying pan into the fire with being a sports washed, oil barons plaything, or you're looking at potentially someone even worse than them, which, even though people will be like, how could you possibly get worse than the Glazers? Well, ask Newcastle fans. There's definitely a way that you could end up with worse than the Glazers, as much as we don't want to imagine it. They generally do seem to be hands off, and you could have the opposite.
They're shit owners, but they aren't the worst owners in sports.
No.
There are football clubs who have worse owners than us. Not that means that we have to be happy with what we've got in any way.
No.
But it's not like you can say it couldn't be any worse, because some people do have it worse than that.
I mean, look at Malaga. I mean, they got to the Champions League quarterfinals in 2013. We're 2 minutes away from getting into the semi-final, but got ruled out because of an offside goal. 6 years later, they're now almost going to get relegated from Segunda in Spain, because they've got an owner who's just stopped giving a shit completely. It's mad.
I said recruitment is all. And on that note, there's some news has just come out, which is that Ed Woodward is no longer involved in the MUFC's recruitment of players.
I read that. Yeah.
Says who?
It's in the formerly great local newspaper, now disreputable online blog.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Good.
Isn't it?
But he's still in charge of negotiating the actual transfers, isn't he?
Matt Judge.
Yeah.
So, do we have any more details on that other than just the headline? Do you want to go into that a bit more? Just because, who said that? Where's that? I mean, is it just according to their sources?
It's just a headline. I can't access it from here.
Okay.
So let's just make it up. And not all the rest of the papers do. But either way, like I think it's the right move, and I think that if you observed United's transfers over the last 7 years since Woodward's been involved, I think you could almost spot a trend that this last year, there has been a move away from if I called it a Woodward signing, I think you'd all probably understand what I meant, which is wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why we didn't sign Fowler in the summer.
Yeah, Maguire, Wan-Bissaka, and Dan James aren't quite as sexy as a trio of signings as Falcao, Di Maria, and Schweinsteiger, but they are what the club need, and they've obviously proven to be excellent. And again, we don't know, but assuming that this had been the case, maybe through the last sort of 12 months that we've seen an upturn in the quality of transfers, then it's a good thing. I think the fewer non-sporting people that are involved in transfers, or non-football sort of experts that are involved in transfers, is probably a good thing. I think there needs to be some kind of balance maybe in there from a business perspective of someone saying, hang on a sec, we can't do this way, this has to come first, we have to look at the commercial side a little bit. But generally, it should be people who know football who are making the football decisions, and the people who know business making the business decisions.
That's why Gill was so successful. I mean, if you look at him, he had a good football mind, but he also had a business side as well, which is why he can make the right transfers. Whereas Woodward, he's just purely based on business. I mean, Sanchez was a good example. I mean, if anyone would have looked at Sanchez at the club, they should have gone, well, his form's been shit. He's on the downturn in terms of his age. He's probably not going to be very good. So let's offer him 400 grand a week and give him a 3-year contract. Great. Cheers.
That's what I'm worried might happen if we did go for Harry Kane. I feel like that will be a repeat.
I feel like Harry Kane's fucked, and we just don't all know it yet.
Exactly. That's exactly what I think.
And I think in terms of like the way Joe Gill and Woodward and that have managed, I think Martin Edwards as well. Martin Edwards broke the transfer record a lot as United gaffer, and he also improved the stadium every couple of years as well. He really did not sit back on his laurels. He oversaw it from the pretty disjointed mess it was towards the back end of the 80s, where you had half standing, half seating. The Stretford end just hadn't been touched in terms of redevelopment. Made it the Bowl initially, then launched it up to 55k for Euro 96. Added the second tier on both the Stretford end and K-stand. Filled in the quadrants. I think the work started on that prior to the Glazer takeover, but since that, there's essentially been fuck all done. And it's 15 years. I think in this time, I'm fairly sure that with Martin Edwards' drive, we probably would have seen the stadium be somewhere in the region of 100k right now.
Yeah.
Just say that's just fallen off. If anyone does want to support the fanzines, then please do, because they might go out of business if you don't buy United We Stand or Red News. So,
and they're a good read as well.
Yeah.
So check them out. Right, I'm going to wrap it up there. But cheers to Karthik, cheers to James, and cheers to Joe. Make sure to subscribe. And I guess we'll see you guys next week for another podcast. Let us know in the comments who you'd like us to try and get on. See you in the next one.